So the topic will be very much aligned, but instead of focusing on Poland, it's about the role of Jewish victims and survivors struggling for justice in Germany. And as you were just presenting, I come from criminology, where for the people that are not very familiar with the field, it's incredible, but 90% of the scholarship, when it deals with crime, it still deals with very ordinary, what we call street crime. So robbery, individual murder, but indeed research in the criminology field has not been pointing out to the really terrible death that is happening in wars, civil conflicts, dictatorships. We have just had the European Society of Criminology 2 months ago in Malaga, and the war in Ukraine was hardly a topic. That's why these events, like the one organized now by Professor Valeria Vegh Weis, are so important. Because as scholars, we need to put all our brain and all our input in trying to find out how to stop these instances of massive murder. And that's unfortunately not the case among criminologists. Trying to then break this situation within my field of study, I brought up all the knowledge from international law and transitional justice, but nevertheless I tried to complement with some very important contributions from criminologists, particularly from state crime criminologists, very few people, particularly from the US, that point out that despite the relevance of international law and transitional justice, we need to be aware that we are asking through these legal tools the same institutions that perpetrate the crime to sort them out. So while states, and as we saw during the Holocaust, also international organizations can be part of these states of denial on confronting atrocities, it's very unlikely that they will go all the way towards seeking accountability and stopping mass atrocities when they are happening. We are seeing it right now in Ukraine. We are like playing a football cup, we are like going on with our everyday life. We cannot expect states and international organizations to do all the work, because in general they are the ones that are or perpetrating the crime or being bystanders. So in saying that, Olia, I am trying to look for other actors, and I also look at the victims as this actor that might go a little bit beyond what top-down power holders do to stop mass atrocities and to find accountability in the aftermath. They are, like victims, are the most affected, of course, by the human rights violations. They are likely to have relevant information about the truth of what happened, as we saw in the different documents that Olia was exposing. They know, of course, which reparation they need to rebuild their lives. They tend to be intimately interested in guaranteeing justice, and they have some perceptions of what cultural changes and legal changes are necessary to avoid repetition. So if we go, if we see this through the transitional justice lens and the 4 pillars, truth, justice, reparations, and guarantees of non-repetition, effective, we can see in the victims, and particularly the victims groups, the ones that have been organized after the atrocities or during the atrocities, a very crucial actor. Here you can see one of my other case studies that are the mothers of Plaza de Mayo in Argentina. So the overall idea that I am trying to work on is that challenging atrocity crimes while they are occurring and offering a traumatic vision in the aftermath that could restore the rule of law is more likely if victims' organizations take precedence over established state or international organizations, so that the degree of victims' involvement might be positively related to the degree of atrocity confrontation and transitional justice outcomes. I work in these 3 contrasting cases, Kenya, Germany, and Argentina. And today we will focus on Germany. And as you know, the post-war transitional justice process, and what I refer to as a victim-centered and transitional and fragmented transitional justice process. So just to give you an overview, this is a project that I am just starting as a habilitation at the Universität. So feedback super welcome. And I try to develop 3 layers. The first one is what has been actually done, what has been actually done, in the 4 pillars of transitional justice, in 3 different periods in the aftermath of the Holocaust, amnesia, normalization, and Germany as a human rights leader, based on secondary literature and content analysis. Then who were the actors involved, and particularly many things that we see as the outcome of state-driven initiatives indeed have been more, had more to do with the role of the victims, again, secondary literature, content analysis, archives, and experts interviews. And finally, in a third treatise, what do the narratives says the narratives of the last 10 years in terms of what has been done and who were the ones behind those actions. And for that I do critical discourse analysis on the speeches of the presidents and the chancellors on the day of the liberation of Auschwitz and Kristallnacht, the media, the 3 main newsletters in Germany, the educational textbooks used in secondary school, and museum exhibitions in the 3 federal museums dealing with the history of the post-Holocaust. Today I will just give you a general overview of some hints that I have been discovering throughout the research. So when we focus on what has been done during the perpetration of the Holocaust, there has been some recent research that has been challenging the so-called myth of passivity. As Oля was also saying, that victims did nothing, not only in the aftermath but also during the crimes. And I am trying to see that how did it perform in the territory of Germany. So what I have found so far is that indeed this myth of passivity that has been pointed out particularly in Poland and in Eastern Europe was also the reality in the territory of Germany. There was a denunciation and documentary resistance, even as a newspaper was published in the Dachau concentration camp near Berlin. There was rescue, even from detention camps, from Dachau and other concentration camps located in the territory of Germany. There was help among Jewish organizations to aid Jewish fellows to go into hiding, to emigrate, or to support them through self-help among the community in hiding. There was partisan resistance and underground work, not only in Eastern Europe, that is always the case, that is exposed, but also in Sachsenhausen, Dachau, and in Buchenwald, all concentration camps located in the territory of Germany. In terms of self-aid, then some say that we can also see as resistance the fact of staying alive and not becoming a mutant, so resist extermination, or spiritual resistance, no surrender to soul. So that when we locate in the moment when crimes were being perpetrated, when the Holocaust was at its most, we didn't expect much of the state. Of course, Germany was the one perpetrating the crimes. We couldn't expect much from the international organizations either. The Red Cross and all the international organizations that we had at the moment had a very, at least a mild role in trying to stop the atrocities, but we can see all this broad range of resistance strategies by Jewish in the German territory while the crimes were being committed. Again, the myth of passivity. Then we will see what the narratives say about it and if they actually recognize all those efforts. And in terms of the aftermath, what has been done in terms of truth, justice, reparations, and guarantees of non-repetition, the mainstream narrative now doesn't talk about silence, but doesn't talk about passivity, but talk about silence. The fact that Jewish servants wanted to rebuild their life and that they were not very committed to engage in the transformation of the German state, but that went to do their life in the United States, in places of immigration, or that they just were focused on their private life, but that they were not real actors engaged in fostering the pillars in the aftermath of the crime. When we go and see the data, again, I am just starting, and for now it's more like a critical analysis of secondary literature. We can see that this seems not to be the case. Indeed, when we when we look at justice, we can see how the Allies focused on very rapid and universal accountability, plus focusing on reconstruction. Very few witnesses were allowed in the Nuremberg trial, the IMT. There was no focus, of course, in the Jewish killing. Wiesel had that famous phrase saying that we were killed again in the context of the trials, or they were pushed to present themselves as nationals of the Allied states rather than Jewish, that it was the identity that they wanted to portray. But then, nevertheless, when we see the narrative, we see the Allies as the main drivers of the IMT and NMT tribunals. We really don't see all these shortcomings, and we don't see either if there was underlying some kind of Jewish victims' involvement in making those trials possible. But just focusing on very openly available secondary literature, so I think that we will get more when we get to the archives and interviews, we can see that indeed there were Jewish survivors, the ones trying to influence the trials that were being held here in Germany and to make them legally possible. We have Lauterkraft, Lemkin, Neumann, Gluck, Hirschheimer, Marcuse, Adorno, all these exiles working from the United States and later from German universities, from the Frankfurt Research Center, trying to create, coin these new concepts such as crimes against humanity, genocide, and the philosophical foundations that made accountability possible. When we see how trials and accountability evolved, we saw something a little bit yesterday with the comparison between Western and East Germany. We can see that focusing on West Germany, so I should have said that I am first focusing only on the West. We can see that between 45 and 58, this first period that is usually referred in the literature as amnesia, most of the cases, some said up to 90%, were set in motion by victims and relatives. So few advanced trials would have taken place without this impulse by the victims. On top, these honor courts that we discussed so far, like Jewish, trying to judge Jewish compliance with the Nazi regime. And we see on the other hand that when victims left Germany in the late 1950s, there started to be very few official prosecutions until the special commission that we discussed yesterday in the conference was put into place. So in numbers, we can see that by 1949, there were 1,500 prosecutions, as I was saying, massively fostered by the victims. And in 1959, when the victims were not in Germany anymore, to impulse these trials, we only had 22. And that's when really this special commission is set when it becomes clear that so much justice was still missing and there was no impulse by the German state. Despite the creation of this central office in 1958, the trials that happened in the aftermath were mostly characterized by what is called Gehilfenjudikatur, this idea that the perpetrators were just abiding orders from the real perpetrators that were at the end held on who were the real perpetrators, maybe only Hitler and Himmel, because all the rest are treated just as helpers, as aiding the real perpetrator. There all started to be retrials that the victim tried them as liars, some confused, that they confused their testimony, that they were not providing true evidence. And it was not until 1979, just as a result of the victim struggle, that the statute of limitations for murder was overturned. And it was not until 2011, so just yesterday, that the requirement that the defendant had personally committed the murder was overturned. So the judiciary so far have been asking to have special motives to really want the murder to happen and to perpetrate the murder by themselves. On the other hand, we had some very important progress in justice, but it was driven by victims. The corporate civil liability processes against E. Farben and other corporations, the very famous Frankfurt Auschwitz trials that were led by Fritz Bauer, who was a Jewish, arguably queer, also from a left-wing political stance, so maybe triple victimized by the patterns of the Nazi regime. And that was unique in terms of press presence, public witnesses, big pictures a big picture of the Holocaust by scholars, and also the convictions. And of course, universal jurisdiction. All the cases that were brought against Nazi crimes throughout the world carried out by the victims. In terms of truth, there was no truth commission or inquiry by the German state, arguably because of the silence of the survivors. But again, if we see very recent literature, we can see that that was not the case, that DPs were preoccupied almost to the point of morbidity with the past, quotation, that they helped them write the history of the last destruction. And we have the Central Committee of the Liberated Jews in the US Zone, historical commissions in Europe, all of them gathering tons of testimonies and truth-based evidence that now is populating museums worldwide. Well, a total here you can see of a lot of data gathered by the victims. If we see about in terms of reparations, also the literature points out like the terrible state of the displaced camps, that there was no opportunity for physical or mental rehabilitation. And again, we can see the efforts by the DPs themselves in the territory of Germany to ship illegal boats to Palestine, seeking traces of their relatives, self-ensuring dignity conditions, self-administrating or distributing the aid via local committees. And we can even see in the actual compensation scheme that was mostly achieved through the work of the claims conference. It was not the same for many other victims of the Holocaust that were not able to organize themselves so strongly, such as the prisoners of war, Roma and Sinti, homosexuals, all of them with very late and insufficient reparations. So it was making it clear that the compensation scheme was not something granted freely by the state, but something that was fought for by the victims. And that when that was not possible, reparations were not there. Also, we can see that, I didn't put it here, but memorials, education material, in all of that, all the literature that I have been handling so far make it very clear that most of the outcomes would have not been possible without the intervention and the commitment of the victims. So if we see this first aspect of the content analysis in terms of what has been done and who are the actors behind them, we can see that so far these are very, very, very intermediate conclusions, and they are not even like just some reflections in these first stages of the research. We can see that even though the victims really wanted to engage in the resistance and then in the fostering of the transitional justice process in Germany, they were systematically restricted by the power holders, who instead insisted on speaking on behalf of them. This, of course, meant that there were a lot of setbacks and that little progress could have been done, was done when victims were not there, and that even when they were really pushing to have it, they were restricted or downplayed by the power holders, with the results that we have very few perpetrators that have been accountable, problems of legitimations, no corporate accountability, no official truth commissions, late and insufficient preparations, etc. And when we look at the level of the narratives, so far I have been able to analyze the three main newspapers in Germany, the speeches that I was in the first moment of the presentation, textbooks in gymnasiums and the exhibitions in the Historical Museum, Resistance Museum, and in the documentation center, we can see that the narratives hardly talk about the victims as active actors, that they are referred as objects of the state mercy or commitment to justice, that when resistance is portrayed, it's mostly about non-Jewish Germans engaged in resistance, particularly the alleged coup d'etat against Hitler is at the core of the Resistance Museum, and that very, very important actions by victims are ignored, silenced under the myth of passiveness and the myth of silence. Just to finish, of course, not including the victims' acts of resistance and the struggle for truth, justice, reparations, and guarantees of non-repetition, allowed to delegitimize them as valid voices and decision makers, and to then ignore or erase them from history and even from today's life. Like, I get these asked questions once and again every time that I do an interview or I present my work. Are there even Jewish people in Germany? The idea that they are not even physically present in the country, at the point that even the representative for Jewish life in Germany is non-Jewish, and all of them not restricted to the Jewish community in the country, but it might be really influencing what we can call the myth of otherness. The idea that the German society is composed by a very homogeneous demographic, and that these others are there just in the margins of society, but have not been playing a decisive role in creating the history of the land. This, of course, can set the ground to keep on thinking that these others are not contributing to building the nation, and therefore set basis for anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and any other rejections of others or not Germans. So this research is aimed not only at really looking at the different actors that can be involved in resisting atrocities and also dealing with the aftermath for Germany, but maybe to set the lessons also for Ukraine and many other countries, and also as a basis to think how we are building the German community today, and what is the role of these non-hegemonic, non-German actors, and the place that they are really playing in building the community would be highlight more in order to overturn this myth of otherness that can only cause iatrogenic effects in terms of peace building and a society of solidarity. Thank you very much.